Okay, we're live. Hey there. Welcome back on this fine Labor Day when all true red-blooded Americans should be out grilling. Instead, we have a thunderstorm and we're supposed to go into work slash class today. What is up with that? Now, apparently, the trade-off here is that we're getting a longer Thanksgiving break, which is nice. And let's see how many people are joining me here today. It looks like we have a little under half the class, which is fine. Today's lecture is totally optional. If you'd like this to be a Q&A session instead, please ask questions in Discord or in the YouTube live chat, and I will answer those rather than going into what I was going to do today, because what I'm going to do today is not going to come up on any kind of test or homework or anything. So if you have any questions pertaining to actual material that you're struggling with or finding difficult, then ask those instead. Let's see, we're still about half the class in viewership. Yes. Alright, I'll wait a couple more minutes to get started in earnest while I set up my camera here and whatnot. So Labor Day is supposed to be the holiday of the working man, the one Monday you get off at the end of summer before the beginning of fall. If you're looking for a job right now in the tech sector, one of the things that I like to look for when I'm applying for work is to see how they structure their day offs. If they don't have an official holiday around Labor Day and the 4th of July, and they are an American-based company, that's something of a red flag for me personally. It usually means they won't value other holidays of similar significance. Almost everywhere will give you Christmas and Thanksgiving time off. If you don't get those, then run. That is a bad company to work for. But Labor Day and 4th of July, if you're getting those off, that is the sign that it looks like you are working for a good place, somewhere with a good work-life balance. So think about that when you're applying for jobs. Take a look at their calendar. Okay, we're going to get started if there are no questions. So last call for questions about something else. Remember, your first homework assignment, the review of Java Swing, is due on Wednesday. So hopefully you know what you're doing, because you will not see me much more before then unless you come to office hours. Okay, well, what we're going to talk about today is the economics of hacking, the economics of the modern hacking environment. Is it worth it to be a black hat hacker? Why do people even bother to do it at all? Where is it going? And what can we do about that? Where is there money to be made? All that kind of thing. So let's begin. We're going to talk about black hat first. A black hat hacker is typically somebody who does it without permission, and typically they're doing it for money, but black hats also include people who hack property that they don't own without the owner's explicit permission, not for profit. There are a lot of other reasons that you might hack property you don't own. And generally there is an element of nefariousness that needs to be involved for you to qualify as a black hat. The world of people who hack just for giggles and do not intend to cause damage are sometimes referred to as gray hats. And then there are many, many places of ambiguity. For example, what if you hack a product that you own but are not legally allowed to tamper with? So this is the case, for example, if you buy a John Deere tractor, you are not legally allowed to change the control panel on it without John Deere's permission, because you haven't actually bought the tractor. You've actually rented a license to use the tractor due to software copyright. So if you hack the tractor's, your own tractor's software in order to repair it, I think most people would not qualify you as a black hat. They would qualify you as a gray hat. But again, the definition is blurry. Just consider black hats to be people who are doing it without the owner's permission. There's an element of damage involved, and typically they are doing it for the money or something similar, political power, etc. Now, in most jurisdictions around the world, America included, it might surprise you to know that cybercriminals face some of the harshest sentences and some of the harshest policing that exists. Cybercriminals are treated by the global legal system, and especially in the US, far worse than murderers, rapists, and drug traffickers. I know people who have been involved in serious crimes uh, of the caliber listed there that have been treated far better than people who have been involved in certain cybercrime, because those crimes hurt a small group of individuals. They hurt maybe one or two. Murder, hurts obviously the people who are the family of the person you killed, but broadly speaking, they hurt only a single person. All crime affects a community, but those crimes affect small groups of people, whereas a hacker can damage the entire community at large. And of course, hackers can cause much more financial damage than your average petty street criminal. Let me ask, you can answer this in Discord or YouTube chat, how much does the average bank robber usually get away with if you come to a bank branch or something with a gun and demand that the tellers shove all the money in the bag or whatever you see in film? How much do those guys typically get away with in a single bank robbery? And I'll give away the answer in a minute here. So if you get caught as a black hat hacker, so if you attempt to penetrate somebody's system for money and you get caught, you will almost certainly go to prison for a very long time. You may even die because the apprehension of cybercriminals is severe. You will almost certainly get swatted. People in tacticals will come and grab you. It is possible to get yourself shot in that situation. So the answers from chat are $200, $5,000. Yes, that's about the range that a typical bank robber makes. It's generally on the order of a few $1,000s is the most that you can take, because banks simply don't have a lot of money there anymore, and they have all these systems in place so that the tellers aren't able to access large amounts of money as well. So back in the day, that wasn't true. There was a point, I guess you could call it the golden age of bank robbery, where you had all the infamous bank robbers that some people still remember, people like Billy the Kid and Pretty Boy Floyd and all those folks from the Wild West days that were famous bank robbers when banks kept gold in their vaults and significant amounts of money. And you'll see a recurring theme from the days back then. Yeah, I don't know the exact number. Someone said, I thought you'd give away the average. No, I don't know the exact number. It's on the order of thousands. No one can give you the exact number because the FBI doesn't exactly compile how much they get off with every time. I suppose you could probably get a pretty good estimate. I think a ballpark is a few $1,000s is the average that a bank robber gets away with, which is not much. And that's not including the fact that many of them are caught and obviously don't get to keep it, and that some of the money is destroyed by die packs or whatever mechanisms are meant to kill the money after the fact. But in the early days of bank robbery, you could get away with considerably more. Those people are still remembered to some extent today, and you'll see a recurring theme in the hacking world that the bank robbers who were most well known and who were the most lucrative generally stole the bank's property, not the customers. It seems to be a recurring theme in history with criminality, that they tend to target organizational wealth instead of individual wealth. Those are the people who tend to be the best remembered. So black hat compensation in general historically has also been really pathetic, not much better than the bank robber. Only black hat hacking takes considerably more technical skill to do than robbing a bank. Obviously it takes a lot less, let's say, courage, but it definitely requires a lot more technical skill. So why do people bother? Let's look at a couple examples. The first guy we're going to look at, Denis Kalviskis. He's a Latvian guy, a Latvian national who lived in Latvia and was 27 years old when he helped write the Goizi virus. He improved the bit. He did not write the whole virus, but he improved some portion of it. And for his services, he was paid a measly $1,000 US. That virus goes on to infect over 40,000 machines and cause millions of dollars in damages. He gets caught in Latvia and serves 10 months in prison in Latvia before then being extradited to the US, serving another 21 months in prison, and then being deported. So nearly 3 years in prison for $1,000. That's actually worse than your average bank robber. That is considerably worse than anything that you could do in terms of labor. You could earn $1,000 if you had the skill to write a virus. You could presumably earn $1,000 much faster than in 3 years. I think almost any job can earn you $1,000 much faster than 3 years. So really a terrible deal for this guy. Let's look at some of the other architects of that virus and see if they made out any better. There's Nikita Kuzmin. He's a Russian guy, a Russian national, and he was 25 years old when he masterminded the virus. So he wrote the bulk of the code, and he was responsible for its distribution and management. He turned his virus into a business after he infected a sufficient number of machines. He rented out access to his virus and the machines that it controlled for about $2,000 a month. And he also sold the source code to his virus to other up-and-coming hackers who wanted to examine it for $50,000. So you could buy the source code for $50,000, or you could just buy access for $2,000 a month, which would give you access to the machines he already infected if you didn't want to go around and infect your own. He stupidly decided to take a vacation to the United States, where he was promptly arrested, and he cooperated with the FBI for a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation in capturing his other compatriots there. So it's not clear, the details of his deal won't be released to the public, but he probably also faced pretty significant penalties and almost certainly had to return the money that he earned. Now, $2,000 a month is a pretty fair amount of money, and so is $50,000 to sail the source code, but is it worth getting arrested? Probably not. Again, it's really not that much money in the scheme of things. And the last fellow we're going to look at is Andrei Turin. This was a fairly recent hack, I think 2 or 3 years ago. He was 31 when he implemented it. And he masterminded a hack that affected a number of major corporations. This was one of the most successful hacks of the decade. He got into Chase, E-Trade, Scottrade, News Corp, many financial corporations all over New York, compromising millions of US dollars from over 80 million individual users. So in the compromise of all these different banks and investing companies that he targeted, he managed to compromise over 80 million user accounts. In some cases, they directly siphoned money, but in most cases, they participated in things like securities fraud, so they would pump up a stock that they also bought, and gambling, again, just investing in something that they knew was going to pay off through gambling, scamming payment processing, so skimming and that sort of thing. There were a lot of things going on in his virus, and that's why he was worth the effort for an international arrest. So he was arrested, again, a Russian national, took a vacation to Georgia, the country. Georgia is more cooperative than Russia. He was arrested on vacation to Georgia. He had to forfeit all his 19 million USD he earned, and then at the age of, I think he's about 35 or so now, faces life in prison for his participation there. You do have to do quite a bit to get life in prison in the United States. You have to kill at least one person very much on purpose, or several not on purpose, to get life in prison. There are very few crimes that will earn you life in prison. Hacking is one of those in the United States. So was the Gozi virus worth it? For those guys, definitely not. I mean, even for the mastermind, $2,000 a month to rent it out, $50,000 for the source code. That's decent money if you're in a low-income nation like Latvia, which isn't even that low income. Perhaps if you're in sub-Saharan Africa or India or somewhere where the incomes are even lower, you might consider that to be worth it. But as an American salary, that's not even especially competitive. That's just reasonable, I suppose, at best. Just so for simple risk-reward, not even considering morality, it already says that black hat hacking isn't really worth it. And even the most successful people are not making that much money. They're really only making thousands. Even though they cause billions in damages through their actions, they don't actually generally make that much money. Now, there are a few here or there, the very successful ones, like the guy we just mentioned previously, who can generate millions of dollars. The problem is that once you become one of those successful people, you become very swattable. You become a huge target. And so eventually, you will be brought down, and you will probably end up jailed. Now, again, back to those really successful people. The main problem when you're a very successful hacker and you start making of millions of dollars, and I guess you can call it black money, so money that you've earned illegally, is that like other criminals who earn lots of money illegally, you always end up getting caught because you have to spend your money somehow. And so once you've exfiltrated, let's say, $1 million from Chase Bank, right? Assuming that Chase Bank didn't notice initially, they will notice eventually. And you will have had to move your money somewhere to spend it. You have to move it to another bank account. That means there's probably going to be a transfer record of some sort. There'll be a record somewhere, even if you get it in cash. Cash has serial numbers. And the value of black money, the value of money that's not earned legally, is really quite low. If you've ever been offered to participate, it's a fairly common scam to offer college students to participate in laundering counterfeit currency, for example. So a counterfeit 10 sells for about $1, maybe $2 on the black market. A counterfeit 20 sells again for like somewhere between 10 and 20% of its value. Illegal money generally is worth far, far less than legal money, so that taps even further into the value that you actually collected. But if your money ends up in a bank account and you earned it illegally, then you're going to get caught at the point that you try to withdraw it. And that's going to be true even if you try to go bank somewhere in like the Cayman Islands or whatever, they'll find you. It doesn't matter, especially once you've stolen enough money, you'll become a big target. So if you're in America, the answer is don't even think about it. I don't think I've ever heard of a successful hacker getting away with stealing more than $1 million for any reasonable amount of time in the United States. It's simply a matter of time before they get you. If you're in Russia, that might be the only place in the world where you might be able to hack American citizens because Russia would not extradite you. But you'll have to commit to staying in Russia for the rest of your life, which might not be great either. And that includes not being able to take vacations to former satellite states like Georgia, because even if you go there, remember, they can get you in Georgia. So the spending your money part has always been the weak point for the black hats. But wait, that's not true anymore, right? Today, there is a kind of money that you can make that can no longer be tracked, right? And so cryptocurrency, which is money that, among other things, guarantees a lack of tracking, has led the world into a golden age of black hat hacking, where it has completely changed the formula. There is now an ability to earn money and not be arrested. Bitcoin was invented around 2008. It took a very long time to catch on, but it has led a revolution in money that can't be tracked. Unfortunately, for most of Bitcoin's life, it also couldn't be spent on anything useful. You could use it to buy drugs or pornography on the internet and maybe donate to people's Patreon, but you couldn't pay your rent in crypto, and you couldn't buy a house in crypto, and you couldn't buy a car in crypto. But now, in 2020, that's starting to change. Crypto is becoming a valuable currency with real exchange markets and real spending power and real value. You can actually spend your Bitcoins on useful things now, and even better, you can convert them into beautiful US dollars that you can spend on anything you like. Beautiful, clean US dollars that are to anyone's otherwise impression legal, and then you can spend them on whatever you like. So cryptocurrency might be the future of hacking. Now, I do mention Bitcoin here, and I will say it's a little bit more later too, but Bitcoin in particular is not untraceable. In fact, none of the crypto coins that are popular today are really perfectly suited for crime, but they are much, much, much better than cash and bank accounts were. So in the golden age of cryptocurrency probably begins, I would say, with the WannaCry ransomware and things from that generation. So WannaCry was released about 2017 when it started infecting computers all around the world, and supposedly it cost about $4 billion in damages. The estimates vary because it infected a lot of personal computers. It ballpark somewhere between $1.5 and $4 billion in damage. And despite damaging that many machines, it only generated about $50,000 in revenue. By the way, from here out, when I say how much an application generated, how much the hackers generated, I'm converting what they made in Bitcoin to the value in USD at that time. So I think because Bitcoin's gone up since 2017, you could say that WannaCry earned more. But at the time, it was about $50,000 worth of Bitcoin that they earned. And the reason WannaCry earned so little, can anybody guess? Actually, let's take it in the chat. Anyone have any idea why WannaCry earned so little in 2017? Now, modern ransomware, on the other hand, is much more lucrative. So by 2020, so this year, the average ransomware payment has surged to the point that it's higher than what WannaCry made, which was probably the most successful, or one of the most successful ransomwares of 2017. You may have seen the message sent out by John Carroll about the University of Utah hack. It also made the news quite a bit. University of Utah paid $457,000 just a few months ago because they were subjected to a ransomware attack. And about half of that was paid by their cyber attack insurance, which is why they were able to stomach that kind of payout. But you're seeing cybersecurity insurances gain in terms of how much they'll pay out, in terms of their premiums. That shows you that the market for ransomware has grown substantially. Riviera Beach City was the largest payout in 2019. That's just a small city, I believe, in Florida, and they paid out over $500,000. The Korean hosting forum, Nayana, was the largest at that time. They paid out $1.15 million. And just recently, this isn't necessarily confirmed, it's mostly speculation that CWT, the Canadian travel firm, paid out $4.5 million, which was actually a discount. They were offered a higher rate and they negotiated down with the hackers to pay less, right? And so anybody have an answer to that question on why WannaCry earned so little and these places earned so much? I'll give it away if I don't get an answer in a minute. But the CWT hack, the hack for $4.5 million, the chat messages between CWT or whoever it is, I think it's only allegedly CWT, and the hackers is still available out there on the internet. You can view the chat messages between the hackers and the ransom victims. They are funny because it is funny how poor the grammar is of the ransomware people and such. So why WannaCry made so little? So WannaCry made a mistake in the target audience. WannaCry targeted primarily personal computers. It was, someone said, was it because it invested homes? Yeah, basically. It targeted personal computers. It did infect some businesses as well. It caused most of its damage in terms of business damages, but it infected individual machines, and it demanded a payout in Bitcoin, which I don't know if any of you have worked with Bitcoin, especially if you've worked in it in 2017. Even with the best instructions, you need to be pretty technically savvy to buy Bitcoin. And if you're that technically savvy, you're probably technically savvy enough to either have not gotten the virus, had to back up, or figured out how to remove the virus. So there's a very small overlap between people who are technically savvy enough to buy Bitcoin, but not technically savvy enough to avoid getting ransomware. And then, of course, the other option there is that you're simply not technically savvy to have anything worthwhile on your computer. At that point, you take it to Best Buy and pay them $100 to start over from scratch. That's the other option that's cheaper than paying the WannaCry Bitcoin ransom. So they made it too difficult to pay the ransom out, and their intended audience generally wasn't able to figure out how to pay the ransom because buying Bitcoin is so clumsy. But now in 2020, buying Bitcoin is a lot easier. You can just make an account on Coinbase and get started with some coins in no time. And that low barrier to entry has made this a much more successful avenue for making money. And also, you'll notice that a lot of these attacks that I listed on the bottom, the most lucrative, they target organizations. And so that is the future of ransomware. They generally will target an organization. They will try to get their ransomware on as many computers in the organization as possible, including on their backup servers and anywhere that they can get that. Then it becomes very compelling to pay the ransom. When it's one computer offline and they want $200, maybe you just call it a loss. When it's your entire network of computers online and it drives your entire business logic, for example, if you're a university and all of your enrollment is offline, well, then the formula definitely starts to tilt in the favor of paying it out. So is hacking worth it today? Still not yet. Crypto is in its infancy, and the real weak point right now is how do you turn your still mostly worthless crypto into good old fiat currency, into American dollars, or something that you can actually spend on stuff that you want instead of drugs, pornography, and Patreon subscriptions, and whatever else you can still buy with Bitcoin. So when you go to Coinbase or something to exchange your Bitcoins, if your Bitcoins were illegally acquired, you're not going to have a good time. The U.S. law enforcement is still very skilled at reclaiming the cryptos of today, especially things like Bitcoin, because Bitcoin against the nation state is not that anonymous. They definitely have the resources to track which coin has gone where. It is as simple as reading the ledger. If you know anything about cryptocurrency, you know that every transaction for Bitcoin is logged in the ledger. That means in order to see how a coin has traveled through the Bitcoin network, you need only to follow the ledger. Someone mentioned you can buy Bitcoin on Robinhood. Yep, you can buy and sell, I think, not Bitcoin necessarily, but some Bitcoin-backed security on Robinhood. You can buy like a Bitcoin ETF or something on Robinhood. Maybe the Bitcoin itself as well. But on the public ledger, all the authorities have to do in order to catch the person who, let's say, ransomware a particular Bitcoin is find the exchange where it pops out and tell those people, hey, where'd you get this? And repeat until they get to the guy who originally made that ransomware trade. So that's still a personal relationships thing. That's something law enforcement is still great at. And just this year, I think just 2 months ago, maybe it was April or May, the U.S. government seized $2 million in Bitcoin from a number of terrorist organizations. So groups like ISIS, Al Qaeda, the military branch of Hamas, all these different organizations. They seized a bunch of money from them. That is, they took control of the Bitcoin wallets, so they actually get the money. But millions more, they simply blacklisted. All you have to do to blacklist a Bitcoin is post on the U.S. federal government's website, if you own this Bitcoin, we're going to get you. No one's going to take that Bitcoin anywhere. It's not going to be worth anything. If the U.S. government says that your Bitcoin is going to get you targeted, no idiot is going to buy that Bitcoin for any amount of money. I mean, who would want to be the dummy holding on to terrorist Bitcoin? That's a really great way to get yourself swatted or shot. So the government can easily blacklist individual coins in a scheme like Bitcoin by simply saying, if you spend that coin, bad things will happen to you. Or if you acquire that coin, bad things will happen to you. As well it should, because at that point, if you buy that coin, you are pretty much literally guilty and obviously guilty of at least sponsoring something that is a known terrorist organization or thought to be a known terrorist organization. So if you pay cash for a coin that the government says is terrorist affiliated, then you are giving cash to an organization the government says is terrorist affiliated, which is a big no-no. Just buying that coin can get you a substantial sentence. However, with the rise of crypto and all the changes in crypto and the general trend in crypto to make it more and more private, it is inevitable that we will one day have a future where hacking is actually worth it. That's not necessarily a good thing. In fact, that's a very bad thing. But it's not something new. It's something that we have, again, run into before. We ran into an era where robbing banks was very much worth it during the gold rush and other times when banks had a lot of money in their vault and the money was difficult to trace. We've run into situations where highway robbery was lucrative when trades started to happen between cities, when privateering was lucrative when trades started to happen overseas. You don't see a lot of highway robbery, a lot of privateering, and a lot of bank robbing today. So it's not necessarily a problem that's unsolvable. However, it is quite possibly the hardest problem in crime to solve. Definitely of this generation, maybe historically. Maybe ransomware will prove to be very, very sticky. All cybercrime has been on the rise exponentially, but ransomware is definitely the largest single category. So by some estimates, the global damage caused from cybercrime was about $3 trillion in 2015, and it's expected to double by 2025. So $6 trillion in damages from cybercrime. On the right, you see Internet Crime Complaint Center stats. So this is businesses and individuals report the value that they've lost to cybercrime. So this definitely doesn't account for the totality of cybercrime, but it accounts for a large share. You can see the trend. Even if this is only 1% of overall cybercrime, you can see the trend. It's not unreasonable to expect that as the crime goes up, the complaints to this organization go up. And you see the rise is very clear and very exponential. It started out what we thought was small in the early 2000s. It rose substantially in the mid-2000s, and it's definitely spiking now. What are the reasons for that? Aside from the rise of Bitcoin, the internet has grown substantially. There are a lot of humans in the world. There are billions of humans in the world. And until very recently, most of them lived in absolute poverty. And until the industrial age, almost all of them lived in absolute poverty. I believe the definition of extreme poverty is that a person survives under approximately $2 a day. It's like $1.90 a day is the definition of extreme poverty. So in red, you see starting from 1820, the percentage of the world, or not the percentage of the world, actually the raw absolute numbers of the world that lives in extreme poverty. So less than $2 a day. Someone asked in YouTube chat if today is optional. Yep. Yeah, it's supposed to be Labor Day. Go grill. Wish I was grilling in this beautiful thunderstorm today. All right, continuing. So the number of people that lives in extreme poverty has dropped off a cliff since 2000. That's great. Congratulations, world. Give yourself a hand. The rise of industry, capitalist production, and Global trade has driven so many people out of extreme poverty, and that's amazing. And also, the human population has grown tremendously, which means people aren't dying in childbirth and dying in infancy, which is also amazing. However, that means there's a lot more people on the internet, both in raw numbers and in terms of the people who can afford internet. There are now way more people than there ever were, and even if 0.1% of those new people on the internet are hackers, that is a lot of new hackers, right? A lot of new cybercrime. Now, while all the different developing nations of the world are slowly brought in to the internet network, the target remains the same. So all those new folks who are coming online in the developing world who want to be cyber criminals, and again, even if it's just 0.0001% of them, that's a lot of people. They want to go where they think they can make the most money. Obviously, if you're going to be a criminal, you're going to try to be the most successful criminal you can be, especially if you're a real go-getter, right? And the US is still the best place to direct your cybercrime. The main reason is that the US has a lot of money, a ton of wealth. The mean wealth in the United States is $432,000. That's a lot of money. You think, wow, I don't know anybody who owns that much money, let alone the average person. Well, as most people know, a lot of our wealth is concentrated at the top in the United States, but a lot of people also don't consider that even your average middle class person has a considerable amount of equity in their home that hackers can come after, different things like that. So there is a substantial amount of money to be had even at the middle. The median wealth, of course, is quite smaller. I think it's like $70,000 or something. But there's a lot of money in this country, and also a lot of adults. There are 250 million adults that you can steal from. Kids obviously don't have money, so why bother stealing from them? And Switzerland and Hong Kong are, I think, the only two even reasonably sized nations that have a higher mean wealth, 564K and 489K respectively, but they're way too small, less than 7 million adults each. So not worth the energy to target those, especially since they have their own languages, right? So you have to be very specific when you hack them. You have to at least somewhat be able to speak either Swedish or Chinese. Now, China is a great target in terms of the number of people. If you can scam in volume in China, that's the place to be because there are 4 times as many adults in China as in the United States. But China is also much poorer in terms of mean wealth. Only 58,000 per person is the mean wealth there. However, China still remains a close second for the, well, I wouldn't say close. The US still wins by quite a bit in terms of target of cybercrime, but it remains a respectable second in terms of hacking targets because of its large volume of adults, and because if you are a hacker and the only language that you speak is Chinese, then China is kind of the best place for you to go because, well, you're not going to hack a lot of Americans with your Chinese talents. It's going to be very difficult for you to even read our software, let alone perform all of the tasks you need to perform in order to get money out of our banking institutions and etc. So hacking does still follow those language barriers to an extent, those actual language barriers, not programming languages. The USA dominates in malware attacks and hacking incidents. Like I said, we win by quite a large margin in per capita attempts and per capita cybercrime. Why don't hackers go after the countries with the most median wealth, which are mostly in the EU? Because hackers target the institutions where wealth is concentrated. They go to places like Chase and Scottrade and E-Trade. That's where the money's at. That's where the rich people put their money, and that's where they're going to get it. So even if the median person in the United States doesn't have that much cash, if they know that most of the rich people have their cash here, then this is still the place to go for. And if you wanted to scam a random member of the population, right, if you just wanted to, let's say, call 100 people in any given country and you knew that you could scam one, the US would still probably be your best bet, just because you would be much more likely to earn that significant jackpot. But other hackers do target places with a larger volume, so it's not to say that the rest of the world isn't targeted as well, just that the US is the most targeted. And then finally, another reason that the US is a big target is because we unfortunately trail other places like the EU in adopting key technology that reduces fraud and cybercrime. For example, the US took a very long time to adopt chip cards. Chip cards took off in Europe pretty fast. Those little RFID-enabled credit cards, some of you still might not have one, and a lot of stores still accept swiping, which sucks as a security measure. But we were pretty slow on the adoption of chip cards, and we also did it wrong because it's supposed to be chip with a pin. They have a pin in Europe. If you're going to travel to Europe, fun fact, you do need to call your credit card company before you go and ask them to issue a pin for your card so that you can use it while you're abroad. Otherwise, it might just get rejected by some merchants there because you don't have a pin to enter. You just have a signature, right, when you pay with your credit card. So we still haven't adopted PIN, we still use signature. And different technologies like that we take a long time to adopt. Another example is in payments between checking accounts. In many parts of Europe, if you want to send somebody $50, you don't have to write them a check, you can just transfer them $50. Or you can quickly write them a check and it will clear almost immediately. They'll get that $50 as soon as you submit your authorization to give it to them. In the United States, it still takes days for our funds to clear. Our ACH money transfer system is very slow and outdated and doesn't cooperate well with the rest of the world, so sending money internationally is an even bigger headache. Another reason is the decline of American enforcement. After the end of the Cold War, the U.S. could extradite anyone, anywhere. Most of the world would, if the U.S. asked very nicely, send somebody to the United States to face trial. But this is becoming less true today. China and Russia contest U.S. extradition, so Chinese and Russian nationals don't usually get deported to the U.S. for trial, even if they are accused of hacking millions of dollars. So if you live in one of these nations, you almost have carte blanche to attack the United States financial infrastructure. And as more nations come under the control of those two foreign powers, extradition treaties with places like Hong Kong come to an end. So Hong Kong, I believe, did actually end their extradition treaty with us probably last year, or they intend to, but it's definitely on the way if it hasn't happened already. Here's the map. Blue obviously is America. Green is where if you commit a cybercrime you'll be deported here to face trial. And gray is where it's not necessarily true that if you commit a cybercrime you'll be deported here to face trial. So they haven't signed a formal treaty. That doesn't necessarily mean it still won't happen. It just means that there's no formal treaty. So most of the world, definitely no cybercrime for you. And even in the rest of it, probably no cybercrime for you. So unless you're a Russian or Chinese national, don't expect to not get extradited. So let's talk about a recent hack that was pretty funny. It was a hack that happened to Twitter. Some of you probably witnessed it because it happened very recently here in July. And it allowed a hacker to send arbitrary messages from a famous or successful or whatever Twitter account. And they used this opportunity, this access that they gained, to perform a relatively low-grade crypto scam. It was almost a joke in the hacking community because they managed to generate so little money with such a high-powered hack. If they had sold this to a nation-state or something, they probably could have earned much more. Imagine the value in saying, like, a nuclear bomb's about to fall on your city. That would have been probably worth a lot more than 110K to somebody. But yes, they generated almost a laughably low amount of money. And the scam went like this. They tweeted from accounts like Apple and other businesses and individuals. I think they used like Elon Musk and people like that. They tweeted, "We're giving back to our community. We support Bitcoin. Believe that you should too. All Bitcoins sent to our address will be sent back to you doubled." So you think, okay, Apple's finally getting in the Bitcoin game. I'm about to double my Bitcoins. Woo. I send some Bitcoin to that address, and obviously you don't get anything back. So again, only one of those scams that you have to be kind of an idiot to fall for in the first place. But quite a few people fell for it. I think at the end they had something like $200,000 in Bitcoin. Now that drops on July 15th. Okay, so keep that in mind, that it drops on July 15th. And it was pulled off by basically a group of teenagers doing simple social engineering. So what they did was they called the Twitter employees. They started with low-level ones and then worked their way up, duped them into giving them their credentials by pretending they had some authority, by pretending they had an emergency, whatever. This is an attack called spear phishing. Phishing is when you try to get somebody to do essentially something that they don't want to do. You're trying to trick them into clicking a link or doing something unintended. Spear phishing is when you do that, but you do it to a specific individual using information about them. So they used low-level Twitter employees to get information about higher-level Twitter employees. Once they had that information, they looked like they were authorized to be getting the info and the access that they were getting. And eventually they managed to get the access level of an internal Twitter employee that was high enough up that they could change the content or send tweets from other accounts, which is a very high level of access. And the main fault of Twitter here is that so many people were able to have that kind of access, that so many people in the company have the ability to send out arbitrary tweets from somebody's account. So the main lesson here from a defensive point of view is make sure you limit the number of people who have that kind of access, because that's a very serious level of access. And again, this was a group of primarily teenagers. The oldest one was 22. The rest were like 19 and under. I think the youngest was 17. So these are mostly young people, mostly messing around. And I think there's like 4 or 5 of them. So between them, they only make like $50,000 each. And of course, they'll all be tried as adults and probably face a very substantial sentence for what they did. And within 16 days, actually, by August, they were already caught and tried. They already had charges filed against them in criminal court. I think they found the first guy within something like 3 or 5 days. I think he's 17 again, so a minor. And nonetheless, they're going to try him as an adult. So even if you're under 18, you're thinking, oh, I can do it because I'll just get juvie. No, you'll probably get tried as an adult. Again, cybercrime generally prosecuted as seriously or more than crimes like rape or assault or murder. You are very likely to get tried as an adult, even if you're 15, 16, 17. And definitely not worth it. Again, not a lot of money. No damage, technically, in this case, except for what they stole from individuals, which can now be returned now that the accounts were seized. Presumably, they'll return the bitcoins to their original owners. Maybe not, who knows. But presumably they will. And other than that, there's no damage to Twitter except reputational damage, but reputational damage is very expensive too, so they will likely end up having to pay much more in restitution than what they stole. So definitely not worth it for these folks either. And this, again, is not a hack that required a lot of technical skill. So just to finish up, what about white hat? What white hat? Can white hats still make money? White hats are people who use their hacking skills legally, usually for pay. They're the cybersecurity consultants and specialists that work for companies and for consultant firms and all those kinds of things. And if you have the right certifications and the right experience and the right classification and all these things, yes, you can make a considerable amount of money. You can make what those Twitter hackers made total. You can easily make that every year and more, depending on how much experience you have in the industry. It's a job where there are many, many six-figure incomes to be earned. And obviously, with the rise of black hat hacking, it is a huge growth industry with a lot of money to be made. So there will only be a bigger and bigger cybersecurity industry popping up as there are more and more cyber attacks happening as well. So, a possible career path for some of you to think about. All right, let me ask a simple but difficult question. What can society do to stop ransomware? Is it possible, now that we have opened up this Pandora's box of cryptocurrency and made ransomware possible? Because prior to cryptocurrency, ransomware faced the problem of never really being able to cash out, especially if you made enough money to attract law enforcement. What can we do in order to stop ransomware or slow it down or make it harder? A couple of the answers so far go back to sticks and stones. So yes, return to monkey is always a possibility. If we return to monkey, there will be no more cybercrime. Probably not the best way to go. Someone else answered malware bytes, but as 2 words, so not the actual name of the software. Yeah, I guess if our malware eats the ransomware, that could work. But the problem with any kind of antivirus, any kind of defensive method in cyberspace is that there will always be exploits. There will be no end to exploits in systems. Ransomware will always be possible. We can make it less likely, we can make it less possible, but there will always be a cutting edge. And especially as cybercrime grows, there are many, many more people on the black hat side. The exploits will be found faster, and they will be more impactful, and they will be more targeted to those who have the most money to steal, or those who are the most vulnerable, right? The less money you can spend on cybersecurity, the more of a target that you become. And so the mega super conglomerates that can afford their cyber insurance and everything will be fully updated and everything, and have the best Malwarebytes equivalents on their systems, and everybody else will be open to that ransomware, right? Just like the Federal Reserve didn't get robbed in the big bank robbing days, it was the little banks on the prairie that got hit up. So what else could we do to stop ransomware? Slow it down, make there be less of it. What can society do except return to monkey? One proposal that a lot of cybersecurity experts are in favor of and a lot are violently against is to make the paying of ransoms illegal. Make the paying of ransoms illegal. This is something that the United States adopted in order to combat its terrorist problem. There was once a significant problem in the United States with hijackings. Obviously, that culminated in a very famous hijacking in 2001, but you definitely don't see a lot of planes getting hijacked anymore. What was once the modus operandi for hijackers was to demand a ransom. And the United States had a simple policy for hijackers and other terrorist organizations. What's the United States policy in response to hijackers, terrorists, etc.? Anybody know what the policy is? What is the policy for ransomers, hijackers, terrorists who threaten the federal government? Someone posted, no negotiations. That's right. They don't negotiate with terrorists. So if you attempt to take a ransom from the government, they will tell you, or are supposed to tell you, to pound sand. We don't negotiate, especially if you target the military or something like that. So someone asked, why do some people not want the paying of ransoms to be illegal? So this is an issue that is up for a lot of debate. The main point for the people who say that it should not be illegal to pay a ransom is, first of all, the government cannot assess the level of loss that you would endure or make that decision for you. It is possible, for example, that the ransomers demand $5, and by not paying it, you will lose, let's say, 200 million in extremely important technological secrets or something to that effect. And such a law would make it impossible for you to make that decision. You would be obviously bound to not pay the ransom and lose all of your super important stuff, which would be bad for society as a whole, depending on how much important stuff is lost. The other thing is that people would simply pay their ransoms in secret, which would make it impossible for law enforcement to properly target these hackers, because it would make it a crime for you to report that you had been hacked in the first place, assuming that you paid the ransom. If you paid the ransom, you would no longer be able to seek protection from law enforcement or even report the crime, because you would be culpable. And those are the two main arguments against why the paying of ransoms should not be illegal. Any other points on that? Anyone have any other reasons why it should be legal or illegal to pay ransoms? By the way, on the other side, the people that do think it should be illegal obviously realize that there would be a very powerful disincentive for hackers to bother doing all these hacks if they knew they couldn't get a payout. If there was no chance of a payout because it was illegal to even get one, then it would make it very difficult for, or very stupid for a hacker to put in all their effort. It's unclear whether or not that would work or not, but it definitely works to an extent for other crimes like kidnappings and hostages. Someone says, crackdown on cryptocurrency as a whole, prevent people from trading in Bitcoin and such. Whoa, now, don't get ahead of yourself there. Yes, that's definitely an avenue that a lot of law enforcement will promote the destruction of cryptocurrency as a whole, making the cryptocurrency illegal or difficult, or making the hard to trace crypto coins more illegal or more difficult, is an avenue that a lot of people advocate for as well. Obviously, that has a lot of downsides too, because it kills the growing cryptocurrency industry where there's already millions of dollars and potentially a lot of human good to be had, aside from the rise of criminality in currency that's not bound to nations and banks and so forth. So, any other thoughts on making ransom payments legal or illegal? I guess it remains to be seen. We'll probably see whether that kind of legislature takes hold in the next 5 years, definitely in the next 10. We'll see if that precedent gets set or not. Today, it's definitely not the precedent. A lot of people are paying their ransoms right now, and they're doing so publicly. And one of the main reasons that hackers want you to pay your ransom publicly, while they'll even post that they got a ransom, is because reputation is all in this game, right? The most important thing for the hackers is to realize that, or for people who have been hacked to realize that if they make the payment, their data will be released. So it becomes a reputation trading game for the hackers as well. We'll talk more about that on a later slide, specifically about ransomware on a day that's not optional. All right, that's it for today. So something to think about. Hopefully you guys who attended enjoyed today's optional lecture. We will resume our talk of the networking layers on Wednesday. Your homework is also due, I believe, that evening, so just check Canvas for that. And I will see you guys on Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your Labor Day. Hope you can grill in this weather.